Hi everyone, so we've gone through all of our different organelles and looked at their functions. So today what I want to do is go more into depth with our cell membrane, its structure, and its function. So with our cell membrane, here are a couple functions that it has. We know that it regulates what enters and leaves the cell. It provides support and protection. It takes in food and water, which are things that our cells need, and it's going to eliminate that waste from our cell membrane. And it's also made up of a lipid bilayer. So we're going to talk exactly about what that means, but if we break down the words here, we know what lipids are. So lipids are part of our fats category, and bilayer means two, and we know what layer means. So we know that this is a fat, two-layer membrane. And it is selectively permeable. So this is also a very important idea here. It's selectively permeable. So what that means is that it doesn't let everything in. It chooses and picks what can go through easily and what has to take another route. So some substances can pass through while others cannot. We also have proteins and carbohydrates that are within that membrane itself. So the membrane we know is a lipid bilayer, so it's made up of fats, but within that lipid bilayer, we're also going to see proteins and carbohydrates. So proteins are going to form channels or pumps that help different materials that can't go through the lipid bilayer through the cell membrane. So it allows for a channel or a pump to allow certain molecules to move through that can't get through the membrane itself. Carbohydrates are like identification cards on the cell membrane. It allows different cells to identify one another, so we know that a certain cell is a liver cell versus a blood cell and things like that. And we refer to our cell membrane as something called the fluid mosaic model because our membranes change sizes, they move around, they're selectively permeable, they're not rigid. So it allows for a lot of movement in the cells itself, allowing things to come in and out, allowing the membrane to change shape and size. So if we take a look at our membrane here, we can see a couple of different things. We can see those carbohydrate chains coming off to identify that cell. We can see some protein channels. And then we also see our lipid bilayer. So if we take a look here, I'm going to section out a tiny portion here. We have a bunch of lipids in a line here, but if we look at our section, we have a head and some tails, and we have another head and some tails. So if we draw out these pieces, we're going to label this part the head, and our head is something called hydrophilic, which means water loving. And you can see that that's true because they're pointing to the outside and the insides of those cells where there's lots of water hanging out. And then we have our tails, which is hydrophobic, which means water hating. And you can see that our tails are pointed in the inside of our membrane here. That allows us to see that usually you're not going to see any water particles between the two layers of our membrane. Okay, so that's where we're going to start with just some of the structure, what is found in that membrane. Remember these protein channels. We also have pumps, carbohydrate chains, all these different things. The structure of our membrane as well, our lipid bilayer, is going to be important, so make sure you take down notes on the head and tails of our membrane. I also just want you to note too that these individual things, the whole thing here, these are called phospholipids. So that's the type of membrane that we're talking about here. Okay, if you have any questions, please let me know, and we'll continue from here next.